I'm here with Christy Jones and Cameron Sweatman of KEV. Christy Jones and I will be presenting today. And yes, I see now that you do hear us. So you were on mute until we were ready to start, and it is just now turning 10 o'clock, so we're happy to begin. Just a few housekeeping reminders. I'm trying to channel my best Mark Burgess for you and say, please mute your phones and do not put us on hold. We will mute you if you do. If you have questions at any time, please put them in the chat pod to your left. We also will open the phone lines at the end of the webinar or the short presentation that we will give if you want to voice your questions there at that time. And we will. This is the third webinar in a series of 3, following up from the Governor's Guidelines, the Revision 1 that was issued in March. And those guidelines regard the negotiations of costs and services in local workforce innovation areas. And those guidelines also provide a template for the Memoranda of Understandings that you're doing, the MOUs, as well as the standard budget forms that go along with the MOUs. So today's presentation is not going to repeat the previous 2 webinars. It's going to provide some new information and some resources. And then after that brief presentation, we will open the phone lines for the question and answer. If you missed any of the previous webinars, that's okay. You can listen to them on the WIOA implementation portal. They're saved there, and if you have any questions about accessing the WIOA implementation portal, please just contact Christy Jones or myself, Bethany Yeager at KEB, and we connect you with Chelsea Jones, who will help you access the portal. Today, also, if we do run out of time or if we're unable to answer any questions, just know that, as usual, we will follow up with a summary of the questions that were asked and the answers that were given in something that we call the MOU FAQ, which Christy Jones will talk about in a little bit. So the webinar today, again, will cover a brief follow-up items from the first 2 webinars. Like I said, we're not going to repeat content, but we are going to follow up on some questions that have been raised and just questions that can maybe benefit from a little bit of clarification. And then we're also going to talk about the updated MOU FAQ that I mentioned. And then that is an ongoing resource for you that will be continually updated. And then the last segment of the webinar will focus on new information for the process of the local and regional plans and MOUs that you're developing. What is the state review process? We're going to present that today. So Christy Jones is going to start off by explaining the follow-up items and the updated MOU FAQ.
Thank you, Bethany. Good morning, everyone. To follow up from the previous 2 webinars, we continue to receive questions of clarification through the MOU FAQ process regarding full-time equivalents, so I thought I'd touch on a few key points and some key reminders. There's no minimum FTE requirement. A partner's minimum contribution may be less than, equal to, or more than 1 full FTE for each comprehensive one-stop center. And if you'd like to look at a hypothetical example, we went through one on the webinar on April 27th. And also, if you go to the MOU FAQ, and I'll show you how to get there on one of the following slides, if you look at the questions from April 12th, question 25 actually has the hypothetical example table. FTEs are negotiated as part of MOU negotiations, and these must be submitted as part of the final budget submittal. Additional FTE questions, some of which are actual questions that came up from the previous webinar, are addressed in the updated MOU FAQ document. New MOU FAQ questions have been posted to the WIOA implementation portal since the last webinar was held. There's actually 16 new MOU FAQ questions. And always the most up-to-date MOU FAQs can be found in 2 locations on the WIOA implementation portal. The first link that you see here takes you to the Documents and Updates section of the portal, and that's the direct MOU FAQs. There's the initial version that was posted on April 12th, and then there's also an updated version that we just posted on May 10th. The second link is the Frequently Asked Questions tab, and that's more of a comprehensive FAQ section. It goes everything from the May 10th document all the way back into the first question of what is WIOA. And one of the nice features is that you can search by category under this section of the portal. We also added the category program-specific content, and I know there's a couple specific adult ed questions that were just added there, so you may want to look at those. Please continue to submit your MOU questions to your program-specific contact who is listed in this table. Your questions will be combined with questions from other local partners, and this is really helpful to the interagency work group to see areas where additional guidance may be needed. You will receive a response to your question, and then also your question and responses will be posted to the portal so that others can look at those. I'm going to turn it back over to Bethany Yeager, and she is going to talk about the process for state review of regional and local plans and MOUs.
Thank you, Christy. This is the new content. The interagency work group and a new subgroup have been working on developing a process. So the purpose of the review process is twofold. So the regional and local plans are subject to state approval, and this is the review process that will result in approval or requested modifications of the plans. The second purpose is to review the MOUs, and that's to ensure that these agreements are between the required partners comply with WIOA and demonstrate a commitment to integration, which is a core value of WIOA. So the review process, we'll walk you through it a little bit at a high level. The review process was developed by the interagency work group in collaboration with the subgroup, and we'll tell you who those subgroup members are in another slide. The review process will be reviewed by the Executive Committee of the Illinois Workforce Innovation Board, the IWIB, at its next meeting. So this is the timeline that will be rather intense from July through September for this process, given that there will be about 54 documents to review. That's 10 regional plans, 22 local plans, and 22 MOUs. So the plan, the approach that we have mapped out is that the reviews will be organized vertically by region. And what that means is that each document, the regional plan will be reviewed first, the local plan second, and the MOUs third. And the vertical review allows a more holistic assessment of the regional and local plans and the MOU for consistency and the commitment to integration that's so important. The reviews will occur in 3 cycles. They're each 3 weeks long. And these cycles are planned out, and we hope it goes that way, but we all know that there will need to be some flexibility as different documents are submitted at different times. And there's also a time sensitivity here related to when the documents are submitted. And the interagency work group agreed on a definition of submission just for purposes of this review process. So the submission on the slide, as you see, will be deemed complete. So your submission of all the documents will be complete for the region when all the regional plan, local plans, and MOUs for that LWIA are submitted. So it's not, you won't see the submission as completed until all 3 documents are, or all multiple documents are submitted together. And only then will the 90-day period for the governor's review begin at this time. So that's in reference to the Notice of Proposed Rules. Prescribes that regional and local plans are automatically approved 90 days after the submission, unless the governor determines in writing that the plan has deficiencies or doesn't comply with WIOA or doesn't align with the unified plan. So by defining submission as the point in which all the regional and local plans and MOUs are completed and submitted, that allows the 90-day clock to start only when all the components are complete and submitted to Mike Baker for this program year. And this supports the approach to review vertically the regional plan, local plan, and MOU for consistency. So this slide shows a little bit about how your plans and MOUs will be assessed. So plans and MOUs will be reviewed against the required content. That means the regional and local plans will be assessed against the State of Illinois Regional and Local Planning Guide. And the MOUs will be assessed against the Governor's Guidelines Revision 1 that addresses MOUs. And every item of required content will be reviewed for the 7 items you see on this slide. So for example, completeness. Is the required content complete? Is it adequate? And by adequate, we mean thorough, complete, specific, relevant, and consistent with the regional and local plans and the state unified plan. And we also are going to evaluate integration for every bit of required content. Is there a specific description or a commitment to it? Is it compliant? I think that's a given with federal requirements. And then we're going to highlight any program-specific issues that members of the subgroup who are representing their required program might notice something that needs to be addressed that's program-specific. And then we also want to highlight the good. Is there any noteworthy items that is exemplary or that others could learn from or replicate? And then suggestions from the reviewers for improvement, and these suggestions could turn into the request for some modifications at the end of the process. So I wanted to give you an example. For example, the review instrument for regional plans. One of the required content is this: describe the strategic vision to support the state and regional economic growth. So for that piece of required content, the description of the vision to support the state and regional economic growth, that alone will be evaluated against the 7 concepts. And then another piece of required content would be, again, evaluated for those 7 concepts. And so it goes on. Every bit of required content will get questions related to these 7 concepts. Same for the local planning guide. You know, one piece of required content is to explain the comprehensive one-stop center and how it provides on-demand access to the required career services, just like stated in the law. So that description will be assessed against those 7 concepts. And then again, for the MOU, you know, for any required content there, that will be assessed against the 7 concepts. So it's going to be repetitive, but at the same time, it allows a thorough review of all the required content according to the planning guide and the governor's guidelines or the MOU template. Okay, so this slide shows a little bit how your plans will be approved. The last one we talked about how they will be assessed. Now this one talks about how they'll be approved. And they're going to be reviewed in cycles, and those cycles end in early September. And the interagency work group then will meet in mid-September to make determinations about the approval of the regional and local plans and MOUs. And the results of that state review will be formally, you'll get feedback at the end of September in terms from the interagency work group so that you will have that formal feedback by the end of September. And then the one exception is if something catches the eye of the reviewers that needs to be addressed right away. After your plans are submitted and early in the review process, if something sticks out, like there's an issue of noncompliance or if there's improper signatures, then those issues might be addressed right away and require action. Otherwise, the formal feedback about the plans and MOUs will not be given until the end of September. And the intent is for the review of the final reports the intent is so that the reviews of the plans and MOUs is consistent and that feedback given is consistent, so that if the reviewers say something early in the process and then later on they see something similar but their thinking about it has evolved. We just want consistency in the feedback given to you. So what do you do while your plans and MOUs are being reviewed? This is what we're calling an intervening period. So between the time that you submit all your documents and the time that you get that formal feedback at the end of September, you're instructed to do what you have said that you will do in the plans and the MOUs. So that you should operate under them until you hear otherwise from the formal feedback. And it is possible that after you get that formal feedback at the end of September, you might then need to make modifications to your plans or MOUs. You will be able to track where your plans and MOUs are in the review process. The thinking right now is that we'll do this through a dashboard on the WIOA implementation portal so that your local boards and all your partners can track the status of each document. And this will be shown publicly in an attempt to show, in an attempt to be transparent through the review process. And what you'll see is, for example, the submission is deemed complete, or the plans are under review, or the plan has been approved, or that the plans are pending modifications. So that you'll see the status of them on the WIOA implementation portal. This is a subgroup that will be working very hard to read all 54 documents between July and September. And you can see there is a representation of all the required partners. And this actually, we did send out an earlier version of the PowerPoint on Monday or Tuesday, I believe. This is an updated chart that is new today. So if you downloaded your PowerPoint already earlier in the week, you might want to just switch out this slide. And these are the contacts. These are the subgroup members. So this is the only change from the version you received prior to the version you see on the screen today. This is just a friendly reminder of all the guidelines for program year 16 or state fiscal year 17. As you can see, the plans are underway. We hope, it seems like everyone is making progress in their MOUs. We did receive budgets from all local areas, so that's preliminary budgets from all local areas, so that's good. The public comment period for regional and local plans should end at the end of this month, and your areas must report the outcomes of the MOU negotiations to Mike Baker by May 31st. And you do this by using the appendix item 11 in the governor's guidelines. This is called an outcome report. That's available on the WIOA implementation portal in part of the governor's guidelines revision 1. That is the form that you should complete and submit to Mike Baker. And then the regional and local plans are also due to Mike Baker on June 30. And that's because our review cycles begin July 1. We're not wasting any time there. The last item is more of a general update and a resource for you going forward. In response to numerous questions received about the timelines, the Department of Commerce issued a notice providing guidance on 3 important issues of WIOA implementation. One is the regional and local planning guidance. The other is the negotiation of costs and services. And the last one is new, relatively new publicly, about the delay of certification of comprehensive one-stop centers. So the section of the law that links certification of comprehensive one-stop centers to infrastructure, because the Department of Labor delayed infrastructure funding until July 1, 2017, that does impact the certification of comprehensive one-stop centers. So the state of Illinois is delaying both until July 1, 2017. This allows more time to plan locally for the certification, but it also allows the Workforce Innovation Board to assess the quality standards that should be built into the criteria that the comprehensive one-stop centers will be built in. So that link is there on the website. We encourage you to read that for the continued guidance on those 3 items. So this ends the presentation portion of the webinar, and Chelsea, thank you for unmuting the line so that we can have questions either submitted through the chat pod or via phone. And on the webinar, we do have Mike Baker with us from Commerce. We have Levon Nelson, I believe, from Illinois Community College Board. Trina Taylor and Janice Taylor-Brown are here from IDES, and Doug Morton for Rehabilitation Services. They are available if you do have any program-specific questions, or we're happy to answer any questions about the review process or anything else that we've been talking about in the webinar.
Our first question is from Bob Fitton. Who can provide copies of the one-stop draft budget?
The question, who can provide copies of the one-stop draft budget? I'm not sure if you mean us providing. Can you clarify a little bit? Are you talking about the standard forms, or are you talking about submitting them, or are you talking about the preliminary budgets that were submitted?
Hey, Bethany, it's Levon.
Hi, Levon.
Can I jump in here?
Sure.
I know that was a question that came up at the Adult Ed Administrators meeting. So it's broader than Adult Ed. I think that there was interest in seeing what the budgets that were submitted, the draft preliminary budgets that were submitted looked like. You know, the partners wanted to see them. But in the case of Bob, Joanna, correct me if I'm wrong, the one you sent in just included the total for Title I-B. And then what we're doing for Adult Ed, at this point for Adult Ed, is we're working with them on coming up with their costs that they're going to, you know, their budget to submit to LWIA 7. So that question originally was specific, I think, to LWIA 7.
And everyone's budget. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
So, Bob, there's more information on Friday.
And I'll just add one other thing about the review of the preliminary budgets. They are under review, and in some circumstances, contacts are being made by KEB to follow up with clarifications or any other information just about the status of the budgets. So if you have not gotten formal feedback, that's okay. Some LWIAs are getting direct feedback. Others are, it'll just kind of be folded into the final review process.
We have a question from Jill Van Zant of the Illinois Department of Employment Security, a question of clarification. In regards to the budget that is submitted with the MOU that is due by May 31st, 2016, should that be a reflection of what the partners are actually going to pay for PY16 state fiscal year 17? Or should it reflect a placeholder budget that was agreed to by the partners but will not be paid by the partners until PY17 state fiscal year 18?
Budget due on the 31st. Yeah, this is Mike from Commerce. The draft budget that was turned in already was the only time budgets are due to us until the MOU is finalized on July 15th. So there's not a budget that needs to be submitted on May 31st with the MOU. We're looking for what we're looking for on the 31st is a notification. Yeah, did you have everything set? Is everybody agreed? And if there are any issues of concern or a partner not in agreement or partners not in agreement, that's what we want to be notified at that point is basically, is everybody on board or are there ongoing issues? But
Mike, it's Levon again. Aren't you referring to that outcome form in the Governor's Guidelines Revision 1?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, might want to just let them know that they can go there and they can see that form for those partners that, you know.
Right, and that's the form that Bethany referred to earlier in the presentation.
Yeah.
Mike, I'm sorry, Mike, this is Janice Taylor-Brown. I think Jill Van Zant's question has less to do with what's due on May 31st versus July 15th, and more so, what is the purpose of the budget as part of the MOU? Is it a sort of a placeholder budget for the following fiscal year, or should the numbers on this year's budget form be the actual numbers that are agreed to and will be paid for by each partner participating?
So the answer relates to the difference between infrastructure costs and shared costs for service delivery in the entire service workforce system. The infrastructure costs are delayed until July 1, 2017. And the state of Illinois is following federal guidance to continue to negotiate local funding agreements for PY16 and state fiscal year 17, just as you have done under WIOA. This does not require you to commit to infrastructure costs this program year or fiscal year. If you do that, if your local area does decide to do infrastructure costs this year, and that there's a commitment requested, this should be subject to negotiations. The proposed law and the rules, the 678.715, make it clear that contributions by the required partners, anything they pay towards infrastructure costs, must be negotiated between the one-step partners, the CEOs, and the local board. So when developing the MOU section on infrastructure costs, the local board and chief elected officials have to work together to decide what those would be. But it's not required for PY16, which is also starting July 1, 2016.
However, Bethany, with that comes the caveat that they're doing what they did under WIOA.
Yes, it's exactly right. So if you did cover whatever you did under WIOA, the guidance is to continue doing that for this program year that starts July 1, 2016.
Yeah.
So the spreadsheets that we use for this fiscal year there should not be numbers on there that are not being considered for cost sharing.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
That's right.
And
They should reflect a commitment that is negotiated.
Okay, and the follow-up to that would be the spreadsheet should include FTEs only for partners who are actually going to be either paying through cash or in-kind contributions. Is that correct as well?
Well,
To see what they're contributing to the overall mix.
I think what we're looking for is what you anticipate the demand to be. No one knows today what the demand will be for all the required programs in the Comprehensive One-Stop Center. So we're asking you to, commit to the FTEs that you will provide, that the program partners will provide to deliver the services that are required under WIOA. And that, like I said, is a little bit of a guess this year, but it is important for us to know that this year so that next year you can plan and we can plan and you can build your budgets around actual. And at the end of the program year, you are required to compare what you projected versus what is actual. So it's a little bit of a challenge this year to get an accurate number, but we are asking you to do that this year and commit to that.
can I?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
Can I put
Levon.
something in?
Sure.
This is Levon. So I had some of our providers call from different LWIAs and say that, like they had been put down, for example, 1 FTE, but it was not, their choice, and they didn't believe they were going to need 1 full-time FTE. So the way I explained it to them is just what Bethany said, that this year they need to estimate their demand. So I explained that if, just took like for an example, if you think it's only going to take 20% of an FTE for you to meet your demand this year, either via on-site or via technology, then that is percentage of the FTE that you would be charged. Now, isn't that correct, Bethany?
That's correct. And this goes back to the MOU FAQ, that if you have questions about that, you can refer to the document, because it does specify that you are not required to have 1 FTE. You can have fractional. By nature, FTEs are fractional. And so we're asking you to make your best estimate this year.
Right. And that is to deliver your career services. The FTE the percentage of an FTE you're going to need to deliver your career services.
It's both. It's more than just career services.
Yeah.
It's to deliver the services that are required under WIOA, and yes, all 13 required career services are required to be available on demand in a one-stop center.
We have another question, and please jump on the line if you have more information about this situation. But what if a one-stop location, such as an IDES office, have empty desks? I believe this is idle capacity, and it would be disallowed cost for other federally funded programs to pay for that space.
Okay, I think that we're not in a position to answer that at this time. We probably would need more information, and it might relate more to the conversation about certification of comprehensive one-stop centers that is being delayed and that more thought will be put into over the next year. But if you have specific information that you could pass along to Mike Baker, that would be helpful.
And who is Kathy? Kathy who?
Hi, Mike. This is Janice Taylor-Brown again. It's Kathy Day. And Kathy, Al Kuhlman has information on you. We will be settling that problem.
Thank you.
Sure.
And let us know how that happened so that, if we can learn from the situation, it would be helpful if you could share that with us.
Okay.
When you mention local plans, does it mean all partners' local plans or just WIOA Title I's local plans?
It means all partners. Local plans apply to all the partners, required partners under WIOA for the local area.
Question for Adele Ed and Levon, if you could assist with this. Are the community colleges required to set aside funds in their FY17 Perkins grants to cover one-stop infrastructure costs?
Well, I don't know, David, that they're actually required to set those funds aside. However, you are going to be at least providing services via technology, and so there could possibly be some small charge, and that's why this year is to look at demand So you will possibly be putting some funds out. So if you want to call that setting them aside or whatever, but have I answered that question? I don't know.
Okay, the next question from
We
Tina.
haven't required you at the state level. We haven't said you must put aside X amount of dollars. That would be a local decision. I'm sorry. That's probably a better answer based on your projected demand.
And this is Mike. It also depends on what you have did in the last program year. So if you were providing financial support last year,
Right.
then that should continue.
Right. But that wouldn't be a set aside per se. Yeah.
One thing after the next. It's all very deliberate.
You'd just be paying for it.
Dina Giacometti, you have a question, and we'd like to follow up on that. It looks very specific, and we'd like to get more information, so we will reach out and follow up on that. Lynn Burkett, you have a question that you'd like to ask over the phone?
Yeah, it's just too much to type, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the first part of it, I just want to go back, Levon, to David's question, because he was specific in saying, did we have to set aside Perkins, FY17 Perkins funds for infrastructure costs? And really, even unless, again, they were paying infrastructure costs under WIOA, we just said there's no infrastructure costs in FY17.
Right. Right.
So they don't have to set aside unless they were doing it. Then that leads me to my second question, which is why I just wanted to readdress that. So we did, when we operated under WIOA, at our institution, both Perkins and Adult Ed did we paid a bill. It really was never as obviously it just wasn't as detailed now as what we're doing now. Okay, but it also was not negotiated. We were just presented, near the end of the year what our shared costs would be for all programs and paid it. And that's how we operated, and that was, we were apparently all okay with it because we did it. However, even though we now have FY17 and we're saying, well, you should just do what you did under WIOA, I would say I would want to at least be able to negotiate even FY17 and not just say, well, we paid X last year, we're going to pay X this year, because I don't really think that's, now that's probably going to be more than what we find in our data collection this year is what we should be paying. So can we negotiate, can we renegotiate, even if we were paying under WIOA, do we have the option to negotiate those payments for FY17 and not just do exactly what we did last year?
This is Mike. That's a great question. I would suggest that to be consistent with the advice we have given, that you should follow suit this year with how you had things arranged in the prior year. Then you have the opportunity to renegotiate that in next year's funding cycle.
Okay. Of course, that also assumes we have any money, which that's a whole other issue.
Right. I mean, I understand what you're getting at. My understanding of the point is, well, we didn't really negotiate stuff in the past, so can we start negotiating now? That, I believe, would throw a lot of chaos into the mix that we would all want to avoid. So you stick with the guidance and follow suit with what you did last year, and with a mind, everybody clear that it's going to be a negotiated process next year, and folks just won't be given a number.
That's fine. Okay, and I want to be clear. This is not, we all went into that. We all did it. We all agreed to do it that way. So it's not anybody's fault that that's how we did it. That's just what we did. So I want to be clear on that too. I'm not pointing fingers. I just wanted to make sure. I was hoping actually we could negotiate for this year, but I hear you. Okay.
Question from Elwia too, if we'll be putting the answers to the questions that are raised in the webinar on the MOU FAQ page, and yes, we will be following up with that at the conclusion of the webinar. Another question, will the local workforce boards be given a chance to review all the local plans in their LWIA in addition to the Title I plan?
Yeah, actually, yeah, because the local board being the individual that submits on behalf of the local area, so yes.
Getting them. Prior to submission, getting them.
This is Pam Ferland. Can I get a question in, please? I'm on the phone.
Sure. Go ahead, Pam.
I have a clarification about the local plan, and when the question was asked, we were told to submit all of them, all the partner plans. Does that mean we need to go back then and include, like, each of our the other core or all the core partner plans as they were submitted individually prior to this submission of the last local plan we did? I'm a little unclear on how that's going to work.
I'm not sure what she's describing. Pam, can you say that again? I don't quite understand what you're describing.
For example, I know Adult Ed already submitted their local plan a few months ago, as did the Department of Rehabilitation Services, and I'm not sure about Wagner-Pfizer. So are those the local plans we're supposed to be submitting, or just the local plan that we've been working on, which incorporates the partners in that? I'm unclear as to what I'm supposed to be submitting for the local plan.
Okay, I think I understand now. So Pam, really it boils down to the plans that you're describing that have been submitted by the other programs are in response to their programs' requirements, in responding to the federal statutory or regulatory requirements. The WIOA plan is intended to incorporate information about how all of the required WIOA partners are providing services and integrating those services and aligning things. So we don't want to see the plan they turned in for their program. We want to see a WIOA plan that indicates how they are providing services in a coordinated, comprehensive, and integrated way. And I would refer you back to the regional and local planning guide and some of the questions that are in there.
All the questions that are in there.
Well, yeah, exactly, yeah. All of the questions that are in there should give you very specific things that you were hoping to see when the plans come in.
Okay, that answers my question. That's the way I thought it was, but then when somebody said, you need to submit all the plans from all the partners, that kind of confused me. But okay, I'm great. Thank you.
Right, yeah, no, all the partners should be part of the one plan. So thank you. That's a great question.
How do the local workforce investment boards go about getting the local plans to review? Have all the partners been asked or required to submit their plans to the Workforce Investment Board for review?
No.
Well, they all happen at different times. They're not all necessarily, I don't think, on exactly the same cycle either.
The thing about the WIOA plans is that there's very specific required content in the local and the regional and local planning guide that's available on the WIOA implementation portal. Those plans should be done in collaboration and integrated and in responses and similar to the MOU. While MOUs are negotiated, the plans are done in collaboration.
And to follow up on that, ultimately the responsibility for filing the WIOA plan with the state falls to the local workforce board. So the local workforce board is the entity that should be, in concert with all the partners, coordinating the effort and pulling the information together. So, the local workforce board is responsible ultimately for making sure that the stuff gets filed. So that should give you, the opportunity to collect all the information and review it prior to submittal, because that's the entity that needs to collect it.
We have a specific Title 1B question. Title 1B will be overpaying this year. Is that going to cause a monitoring problem for us with the new regulations and intent?
Well, the new regulations are not finalized, so any question about what's going to be a problem or not a problem based on the regulations really cannot be answered at this time. We understand that there may be issues that arise when the final rules and regs come out, and if they do, we will deal with them at that point. But we are not going to put folks in jeopardy for following the process that we prescribed. So we will deal with anything unexpected that comes up that requires it. But otherwise, don't worry about that sort of issue at this time.
Would you guys go back and answer Kathy's first question? If all partners have been negotiating this year, are you suggesting we should stop?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No.
I didn't think so, because if they want to pay more under WIOA or come in and do things differently, they still can.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
to the letter of the act, that's true. Our guidance has been to just follow suit with last year, so things stay as clean and as trouble-free as possible for all the parties involved. But the negotiation process that everyone should be undergoing right now is determining, okay, how are we all going to provide services? And how are we going to provide those services, with the funding that funding process that was in place last year. So there's definitely lots of negotiation that should be going on how all the partners are going to work together to make sure that all the services are provided in the manner required by the Act.
Mike, this is Kathy Lively.
Hello.
I have a question because, for instance, we had 2 comprehensive one-stops in our former budget, which is why we chose as a workforce area to begin negotiations in terms of trying to understand what each other can do. I'm not talking about costs. I'm talking about the true costs of operating one comprehensive center. So by virtue of doing that alone, we've been thrown into doing much more than just talking about FTEs. So I just want to be sure that's okay because we've put a lot of effort into this.
Kathy Lively, that is absolutely what you should be doing. You are on track.
Thank you.
The phone line is open if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask over the phone.
Yeah, that's not a question.
We see someone typing in now, so we'll give Sue Clark a minute. Okay. Okay. We'll give it another minute if anyone would like to ask a question.
Oh, you can. Yeah, like I said, all responses to questions of clarification for the webinar will be built into the MOU FAQs. So
It will be in writing.
Yeah. Now, don't misconstrue that. Let me clarify that there may be an issue that arises when the regs are finalized and released. So we may have to come back to you to say, okay, remember all that stuff we said? Well, the federal government changed the rules on us, literally, and we're going to have to do something a little bit different in this or that specific area. So, we hope that doesn't happen, but it's a possibility. So
Pretty much, yeah.
We'll all cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah.
Mike, and I think this is Levon, that's a really good point to keep in mind. We are doing our best to follow everything, but we don't know what the final, just ask for patience from everybody. We know
Hey,
it's...
Mike, this is Pam Furlan again. I have another question. The intent all along was to kind of tweak local plans and regional plans as we went along here. If we make changes to those from the plan that was put out for public review, do we need to list those as public comments? Or, I mean, it's not really public. It's like, us changing it. So do we need to list that as public comments, or how would we address that?
Well, it's hard to give you a blanket answer to that because different changes have different degrees of significance. So if the change you have in mind or the change that would need to be made is a minor technical change, that's one response. But if you have a wholesale rethinking of how you're going to provide services or how the partners are going to operate together, that's a different answer. So the best I can tell you at this point is we would look at that on a case-by-case basis. But if you are making changes in response to a public comment, then obviously mark that down as, hey, a public comment came in, it required us to rethink a couple of things, and here's how the plan has changed based on that public comment.
Okay, I'm guessing there are going to be some pretty significant changes. But they're not necessarily going to be based on public comment. They may be based on internal changes. So do we need to list that anywhere, or just make the change, or how does that work?
Yeah, my advice at this point would be we definitely want to see what those changes are so we can make sure that everybody is on board with understanding what the latest version is. But depending on the significance of those changes, we may ask you to repost the plan just so the public is aware of it. So we'll have to look at that on a case-by-case basis, but we will figure out a way to handle that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right.
We have a question from Michelle Cerruti out of WIOA 25. If partners agreed to amounts last year and did not pay, what do we do this year?
So the intent is that the budget lays out what the partners plan to contribute. So in prior guidance on this question has come up, and the idea is like if you agree to an amount with no intent to pay it, you really haven't agreed. So my advice would be that you should have down the amounts that partners are agreeable and able to pay. Now, I know the state budget impasse throws a lot of questions on some of the partners. That's an unfortunate coincidence and circumstance we're in, and that's one that we will have to deal with on a case-by-case basis as we go forward, and that situation works itself out.
Mike, Sylvan, it could be too. I don't know, Michelle, the specific situation or partner, but since the lack of a state budget goes all the way back to July 1st, almost, of course, a year ago, perhaps the partner did intend to pay, but the lack of a budget, caused them to be unable to pay. The hope would be that in an LWIA, that there would be the ability to communicate and have this dialogue and, not just be surprised at the end of the year that they didn't pay, but to try to get, at what is going on. And perhaps that was the case. Maybe there was they've just decided, I'm not going to pay. On the other hand, maybe it was that we've been without a budget for a year. I don't know. So I think the thing is to have a discussion. I don't know if that's already taken place or not.
Not looking back, we're looking forward.
Huh?
I'm sorry, I was talking to myself there.
Oh.
Thank you, Levon. That was helpful.
Okay.
Looking at someone has written what happens to cost Title I is already overpaid. We're looking forward, we're not looking back. So the concept is we want to keep things as clean as possible, and we have enough cans of worms in front of us right now. We don't want to open up any more than absolutely necessary.
So I will just, in case anyone else is typing, I'll just send this little note out that the Wednesday webinars most likely are going to be postponed through June, just because the regional and local plans are going on, the MOUs are going on, there's a lot of policy going on. So the series of webinars, and there's also a series of webinars being offered by other organizations in June. So we're going to take a break from the Wednesday webinars for WIOA, but then if something comes up, we'll certainly schedule one, or if a policy is issued, we'll schedule one as soon as possible to kind of explain what that new policy is. So just so you know, they are on hold for the month of June, but we'll call them as needed and as soon as possible once new information comes out.
Okay, in response to the guest question at the end, that's a hypothetical. So we could play what if on lots of different scenarios. We have no indication that is possible or likely to happen. So, when the regs come out, my prior comment stands. We will all deal with whatever those throw at us. We will deal with at the time, and no more, no less.
We do see maybe one or two people typing, so we'll just give that another few seconds and then.
Mike, don't forget to mute yourself.
All right, well, I don't think we have any others coming in. We do thank you today for your time and for all your questions, and we know there's a lot of hard work going on for the regional and local plans and MOUs. We'll be in touch as soon as possible with the MOU FAQ document. We do encourage you to check that out. It'll be updated regularly on the portal. And we also will be in touch as soon as possible once we know when the next webinar will be held for WIOA Wednesday webinars. But thank you very much for your time and energy, and we'll talk soon.